Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wendy Farthing. I'm with the Maryland Living Well Center of Excellence, and welcome to our Caregiver webinar series. We're in collaboration with the Maryland Department on Aging and the Alzheimer's Association. This is series one of two. Today, we'll be talking about Money Matters. This is a grant that was funded through the Administration through Community Living, and it's administered through MDOA. This webinar will be recorded and housed on our website. Today, after the conclusion of the webinar, we will be sending you an email with a link to the resources that are provided for this webinar. This caregiving webinar series was based on a 2023 Maryland Commission on Aging survey to better understand the experiences and needs of caregivers. And we identified some priority topics, and money matters and resources for caregivers were two of the topics. If you've signed up for this one, there is also the next webinar series is number two, which will be November the 14th at 1 p.m. It's exploring care and support services. So that will talk about important plan for care changes, what types of resources and supports that are available. We'll talk about respite care, long-term care, and end-of-life options. Today's presenter is Jennifer Schermerhorn. She's an LCSW. She holds her bachelor's and master's degree in social work from Salisbury University, and she currently serves as the director of graduate field education. She's also a clinical associate professor at the School of Social Work at Salisbury University. Her practice background includes over 10 years of experience in long-term care as a nursing home social worker. And Jennifer is currently a community educator volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association, and she's delivering educational programs at both the local community and virtually as she serves as president on the board of directors on the Eastern Shore Area Health Education Center. So I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer. I'm going to stop sharing and we will start the presentation.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that. And I'm going to
You.
share my screen and we will get started. Okay, everybody should be seeing my slides now. So thanks for the introduction, Wendy. So it's a pleasure to be here. Today we are going to be covering a program created by the Alzheimer's Association on Managing Money, a caregiver's guide to finances. And this program is really designed for individuals who are caring for someone who is living with Alzheimer's or another dementia or even other chronic illnesses. So we're going to have throughout the program, we have some videos of caregivers who, as well as dementia care experts who will discuss some of these very important topics. So a little bit of a disclaimer that we have here. You're going to hear general information on legal, financial, and medical issues. So this is not meant to take the place of any professional advice that you may receive. And so because laws change and vary greatly from state to state, if you have really specific financial, legal, or medical questions really specific to your own situation, we would just advise that you speak to a professional before, acting on any of the information we have in today's program. And then we do like to acknowledge the steering committee that spent a lot of time putting together all of this valuable information. And so you can see all of those entities here on this slide. So here's what we're going to cover over this next hour together. We're going to look at how caregiving affects finances. We are going to talk about some of the legal and financial documents that caregivers should make sure that we have in place, talk about how to have these discussions about financial decisions and planning, and identify some steps to lower the chances of financial abuse and fraud. as well as backup plans in case you, as the caregiver, are no longer able to provide care. And as we go through today's program, you're going to hear some sort of key terms. So we wanted to provide some definitions of those for you. So you may hear the terms caregiver or care partner. And a caregiver really describes a family member, friend, or legal guardian who is supporting someone with their health needs and their well being. And caregiving usually refers to helping somebody with their activities of daily living, like bathing and dressing, shopping, managing their money. And so you may also hear the term care partner, which is used often to describe someone that is supporting a person living with Alzheimer's in those early stages when the person is still able to do a lot of activities on their own or with minimal help. And then the word finances, everyone is pretty much familiar with that, but really it's everything money and things that are worth money. So we may be talking about things like household cash flow, bank accounts, credit cards, loans, insurance policies, or retirement plans. And financial literacy, a little bit of a buzzword these days, but really is just our overall understanding about how we manage our money, from handling our day to day expenses as well as planning for the future. And so it's really that ability to make informed decisions about money. Okay. So, our financial decisions and actions have a significant impact on our lives, both now and in the future. So, here's a little quiz. You can feel free to put your answers in the chat if you would like. What percentage of caregivers do you believe have out of pocket costs as a result of caregiving?
55%.
Just checking the chat. So we've got 95, 78. So it is 78%. So more than 3/4 of caregivers have out of pocket costs as a result of caregiving. This is according to an AARP report. And these things include household expenses like mortgage payments, home modifications, medical expenses like copays, medical equipment, and also travel to doctor's appointments. So that is a lot of money right there that goes into caregiving. It skipped on me. Let me go back. Caregiving has an impact on finances in a lot of different ways, because caregiving takes a lot of time, just providing that care to a loved one. It can also affect that person's employment. And many caregivers have to end up cutting their hours back at work, retiring early, taking time off, or, just quitting their jobs altogether. And these decisions can lead to lost income, increased debt, and difficulty saving for retirement or cutting back on other costs. And a lot of people don't realize how expensive it is to care for others. So we will hear from a caregiver more about this.
So some of the sacrifices I've had to make financially due to having to care for my mom were things like paying for some of her care, doctor visits in some cases, clothing, to try to limit the spend down of her money. So I supplemented where I could and then retired early, which impacted my income to continue to care for her, and then looking into getting a part-time job to supplement her memory care, facility care.
Caregiving and managing financial challenges also can have a major impact on their own health because of high levels of burden, exhaustion, uncertainty, and stress. Caregivers often will put off taking care of their own needs because they'll skip going to doctor's appointments, they don't get enough sleep, or they ignore symptoms of physical and mental health conditions. And when caregivers don't take care of themselves, their own health can get worse, which then leads to additional and increased medical expenses. So every illness brings different medical, emotional, and financial challenges for the caregiver. Um, Caring for a person with Alzheimer's or another dementia in itself can be particularly expensive. So, next we have a little question about Alzheimer's. Do you think that Alzheimer's is a normal part of aging? True or false? That's right, it's false. So, Alzheimer's is a progressive and fatal brain disease. Symptoms usually develop slowly and get worse over time, becoming severe enough to affect the person's ability to complete their daily tasks. The greatest risk factor for Alzheimer's is increasing age, but the disease itself is not a normal part of aging. Most individuals with the disease are age 65 and older, and after age 65, the risk of developing Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. And after age 85, the risk is about 1 in 3. I'm not sure why it's skipping on me. True or false? Alzheimer's only affects a person's memory. That's correct. That is also false. So Alzheimer's impacts a person's memory, but also their thinking and their behavior. And that can include their ability to manage money effectively. So studies show that trouble managing bills and other financial problems can sometimes be an early sign of dementia. And so this is another important reason why it's important to understand how the disease has an impact on finances. Alzheimer's disease usually progresses slowly through 3 stages: early, middle, and late. And you may sometimes hear it referred to in medical settings as mild, moderate, and severe. The symptoms will worsen over time, and the rate at which the disease progresses varies from person to person. No two people go through the disease progression in exactly the same way. On average, the person lives approximately 4 to 8 years after diagnosis, but some people can live 20 years or more, just depending on other factors and other medical conditions. As the person advances through the disease, they will have increased needs for care. They'll be able to do things less independently, and so the cost of their care is going to continue to increase as well. So, in the beginning, people living with Alzheimer's may start to have trouble managing money or remembering to pay bills. As the disease gets worse, they are no longer able to communicate their wishes to family and friends or make important decisions about financial or legal issues. Many people avoid financial planning because thinking about it causes anxiety and fear. But preparing for the future and the costs that go along with it can actually help people lower their stress. Early planning is especially important for a person with Alzheimer's or other dementia because it allows them the opportunity to participate in decision making about their future care and finances. The financial impact of Alzheimer's disease on caregivers is twofold. As we discussed earlier, many caregivers experience financial problems because they have to reduce their hours at work or take time off. And as the disease progresses, the expenses are going to increase because of the increased need for care and support. So we'll hear from another caregiver.
So when we finally moved into assisted living, when we first got the cost, it was going to be $5,000 a month. When we started adding on daily medications and housekeeping and all the other things that come with it, we were quickly at $6,000 per month. In my mind, every month I was, doing the calculations of, all right, how much money does Dad have left? How long can this last? What happens when that goes away?
So caregiving for a person with Alzheimer's and other dementia has unique challenges. Dementia caregivers spend more than $11,000 a year on out-of-pocket caregiving costs, which is nearly twice as much as non-dementia caregivers. And these challenges, along with the stresses of caregiving, can lead to increased depression or anxiety for caregivers. 30 to 40% of dementia caregivers experience depression, while 44% have anxiety. And 2/3 of dementia caregivers are women, and they are more likely to experience the stress of caregiving. So, do you think that people under the age of 65 can develop Alzheimer's? True or false? That's correct. That is true. So, while the greatest risk factor for Alzheimer's and other dementias is older adults and age, people younger than the age of 65 can develop Alzheimer's. And so this is often referred to as younger onset or early onset Alzheimer's. So people living with younger onset Alzheimer's and their caregivers face additional financial challenges. So for younger onset Alzheimer's and their caregivers, many of these individuals report having to lose or quit their jobs because of the cognitive changes that are happening and the inability to continue working. And so, as a result, these individuals aren't able to take advantage of the benefits that they might have through their employer, like disability insurance or FMLA protections or continued medical insurance coverage through COBRA. People living with younger onset Alzheimer's and their care partners ultimately have less time to prepare for the future and plan savings for retirement. And their care partners face unique challenges because they are also typically younger and at a different stage in their life than those individuals that are diagnosed later with Alzheimer's. Care partners often have to return to work, increase their hours, or even get another job to make up for a loss in income while still taking care of all of the family responsibilities. Many of the care partners have children at home. And so they're facing those increased costs of raising a family along with taking care of their loved one. And then because of the financial strain of the disease, they may no longer be able to start or continue saving for their like children's education and just other things that families like to do, like going on vacations. And typically, because they are younger, they may still have a mortgage, they may have other loans and debt, car payments. Also, many resources for assistance and support require that the person be 65 or older in order to qualify. And there is a 2-year waiting period between receiving Social Security disability insurance and Medicare eligibility. So that can be a long time to wait for insurance coverage. And so that it can have an impact on the entire family's insurance coverage, especially if that individual was the one that was working. Another group of caregivers that faces unique challenges are the LGBTQ population and community. They're more likely to be single, so they often live alone and they're less likely to have children. So this might mean that they might have a smaller support network, which can present with difficulties as Alzheimer's progresses, since they're eventually going to need someone to take over making financial decisions and paying bills. And it's important for members of the LGBTQ community to have financial plans in place because it helps make sure that caregivers who are not related to them can access the money and help the person manage it. And then the last population to look at that has increased challenges are low income households. And so they may be unemployed or have part-time or low-paying jobs that often don't come with retirement benefits and other benefits to save for the future. They often struggle to make ends meet. They have limited financial resources to pay their bills or cover medical expenses. And the financial strain can mean relying on credit cards or taking out loans, which causes increased debt and poverty. And this adds to increased stress, to less ability to pay for resources that can provide relief, like respite care. So families with limited income may qualify for care and support services at a reduced rate or little to no cost. So now we're going to talk about what we can do to avoid or reduce financial strains of caregiving. Who do you think can benefit from putting financial plans in place for the future? People with a lot of money, people retiring soon, caregivers, low-income households, or everyone? Yeah, absolutely. Everyone. Most people assume that financial planning is only helpful for people who have a lot of money or make a lot of money, but everyone can benefit from putting financial plans in place, especially for those who are living with or caring for someone with a disease or a chronic illness. Financial planning helps to make sure that care costs are going to be covered and prevents financial hardship in the future. So there are a lot of benefits to putting financial plans in place as soon as possible for both the person that's receiving care and the caregiver. So benefits would be knowing what the person wants, knowing what their wishes are, feeling more confident about making important decisions when the person you are caring for can no longer make them because you know what they would have wanted, knowing how to handle financial issues and pay for care. Less chance of making some costly or unwise decisions, having to make them in a crisis type situation or take money from a 401 account too early and be penalized for that. So we're going to hear from one of our dementia care experts and also a caregiver.
One of the benefits of putting financial plans in place for caregivers is simply peace of mind. Oftentimes we have a lot of anxiety and fear about the unknown. How long is the disease going to last? What are the care needs going to be? When we think of all of those things that we might be apprehensive about and we put plans in place for if this happens, here's how we'll handle it. And we really think through, here's what's typical with the disease, here's what I need to be thinking about, and here's my plan for that. it can be such a gift to the whole family because people can settle in and focus on, here's what I need to focus on today, here's what I need to think about right now, without the weight of the what ifs hanging over their head.
My mother, by putting plans in place early, that really helped me because it gives me a sense of confidence that I'm doing the things that she really wants to be done. It allows me to not have to worry about decisions that I make because my mother has already laid out the plan. She's stated her wishes, and my role is really to execute those plans. I have found that making decisions for my own situation can often be difficult. And so it's even harder to make decisions, especially when it comes to medical decisions, financial decisions. To have that responsibility of making those decisions for someone else can be very, very difficult. So in that my mother was so prepared and had laid out financial plans and really had a structure around her life, that has really allowed me to be less anxious as I perform the caregiving role.
And so, again, there are benefits of early planning for the individual receiving care as well, which is, the ability to share exactly what they want to happen and make decisions about their finances and their future. A sense of reassurance that others know their wishes and will follow them. And, just an overall feeling of relief that comes from knowing that you have all of these plans in place and you don't have to worry about it.
One benefit of planning early for the person with the disease is that they get to have their say. They get to say, here is how I want things to play out. If there's ever a time when I can't live alone or when I need this kind of care, here's how I'd like that to happen. Here's who I want to be making decisions on my behalf if I can't make them for myself. So they get to have their say. In addition, they get to make choices about how they live their life, what they do now and in the months and years to come, with this additional knowledge of, hey, I've got this disease and here's what I can expect. And so a lot of people tell us that they choose differently, and they choose differently from each other. I talked to one person with Alzheimer's who said, you know what? I want every day to be regular. I want to work in my flower beds. I want to play with my grandkids. I want to have lunch with a friend. I just want lots of great regular days. I've talked to other folks with dementia diseases who said, I want to do the things I've been looking forward to. I want to take some big trips, or I want to do some really special things with the people I'm close to. So it's not the same for everybody, but the person with the disease gets to make choices and gets to live life more on their terms.
So now that we've talked about all the reasons why financial planning is important, now we're going to learn more about how to start the financial planning process and how we're going to have those conversations about money with the person that we are providing care for. And so, even those that are comfortable managing their own money may find it difficult to, discuss someone else's finances with them. So, talking about money can make people feel anxious or uncomfortable. It's hard to know how to start these conversations, but there are lots of things that we can do to make them productive conversations. So, to feel more confident when starting a discussion about finances, it's often helpful to write down your goals and what financial documents you want to review or discuss. Identify which family members or close friends should be a part of financial planning conversations. So these are should be individuals that the person living with the disease trusts and who knows about the person's medical and financial situation. Also, thinking about the time of day, a calm time of day, a quiet place, which can help to lower the stress or anxiety for everybody that's involved. Encourage the person to be honest about their assets and their expenses, as well as the things that are important to them. And, don't rush. Planning does take time, and you can focus on some of the easy wins first and then build on from those successes. Additional tips would be that to be patient and understanding. It can be hard to ask for and accept help with managing finances, especially for someone living with dementia. Ask about their wishes for their finances and their future care. Explain the importance of planning early so that you can honor their wishes. Don't judge the person and their decisions. As we've heard previously, everyone handles their money in their own way. And the goal is to come to an agreement about how the person's money will be managed when they are no longer able to do so. If the person has difficulty communicating, it might be helpful to use shorter sentences and speak in more simpler terms. It might help to pause at times to make sure that the person is understanding what's being said. Repeat what you heard them say and ask if you're understanding them correctly. If it becomes stressful, just take a break. Try again later. It's okay for this to be a process that happens over time. And try to end things on a positive note. These conversations are difficult for everyone. Check in regularly. Situations change, and as care needs change, so do the financial needs. So, plan to have these discussions about once a year, or if there's any kind of major changes in the person's situation or health condition.
Advice I'd have for other caregivers if the conversation about finances doesn't go well at first is to keep trying. It took a while for my mom to come around, and I was exasperated. I would try to catch her at a good moment, and sometimes she'd give me a little tidbit here or there, so it might take time to just pull it all together. It's sort of trying to understand the moment if you're having a good time. What I did also was to bring up friends. My mother was very empathetic, so if I'd say, oh, remember so-and-so? They had a situation with their mom or dad or family member where something happened and the person didn't know what to do, or they didn't have understanding about it. So that was really hard on them. She'd say, oh, really? And I'd say, yeah, see, that would help me if, we talked about that kind of thing. And that would usually get her. So in my case, that empathy is what I would kind of try to use for her to open up more, but continuing to do it, catching on a good day. That was key because it took time and it was piecemeal. Small victories, just get as much as you can over time and keep at it, because there usually will be a window where you can kind of break through, or in some cases it might be someone else has to talk to them.
And here's some examples of how you might start the conversation with a positive statement, confidence and connection with the person that you're caring for. So, for example, I've always admired the way you handle your finances. I want to learn more about what works well for you. I've noticed you seem worried about finances these days. What worries you the most? What can I do to help? I respect your privacy, but it would give me peace of mind to know if you have financial plans in place so I can follow your wishes. And if you're starting a conversation about your own financial wishes with someone, you could say, I want to talk to you with you about my finances so you can access them in case of an emergency. Or I really want you to understand my wishes for the future. Let's talk about how I want my finances managed. And you'll notice down here in the corner, it mentions an activity. So you will have access to, there are a number of activity handouts that are part of this program. And you'll have access to all of these after today's program. So next, we're going to talk about another issue that can have a major impact on finances for older adults, and especially those living with dementia. So we're going to start with a question about what you know about financial abuse, fraud, and scams in older Americans. So on average, how much money do Americans age 80 and older lose each year as a result of financial abuse, fraud, and scams? We got 15,700, 39,200. Yes, it's startling. Almost $40,000 is lost each year. And financial exploitation is the most common form of elder abuse, but unfortunately, only a small fraction of these incidents are actually even reported. So, financial crimes against older Americans are an increasingly growing problem. This abuse can occur anywhere, including at home and in care settings. And most states have laws that make elder financial abuse a crime. People living with dementia are at a greater risk of becoming a victim of fraud and financial abuse because they may not remember or report the abuse or even understand that someone's trying to take advantage of them. And as memory and thinking skills decline, they often struggle to make good financial decisions, which makes them more vulnerable to scams and fraud.
People living with dementia are more susceptible perhaps to fraud and financial abuse than other people because they have a disease that's attacking their brain. And so their ability to solve problems, to think about things logically, to have insight may be impaired, and they may be able to be tricked by people they trust or people who seem nice or seem trustworthy in a way that they wouldn't have been at an earlier time.
And on this slide, these are some examples of signs that we might know a person who's having problems with money or potentially being taken advantage of. So things like piles of unopened bills, the electricity, gas, or other utilities get shut off because those bills weren't paid, unusual or large purchases, buying the same thing more than once, or buying things that they don't need, um, giving money to all the telemarketers that are calling, or sending money in the mail to various companies that are asking. They might give money to the same person or company multiple times, and missing money or unexplained withdrawals from the person's bank account. So, as a caregiver, there are some things that you can do to reduce the person's risk of financial abuse and fraud, and include the person that you're caring for in on this process as much as possible so that they can help be a decision maker in what safety measures are put in place. So, agree to a charge or a spending limit on credit cards. Create a separate account where you keep a small agreed upon money amount of money that the person can use for recreational activities like going out for meals with friends. Set up auto pay for bills instead of paying them by check. Um, so that way a lot of things aren't going through the mail. Set up sign up to receive automatic notifications for withdrawals from bank accounts or large charges to credit cards. Request electronic statements from the bank and credit cards. So, again, those things aren't going through the mail. Watch for any unusual purchases or changes in how the person typically spends their money. Sign up for the Do Not Call list at donotcall.gov. And ask credit card companies to stop sending those really annoying balance transfer checks in the mail. And so there is a handout, if this is helpful to you, in the worksheets that you'll get about avoiding financial abuse and fraud.
So one of the things that I did, my father was very proud. He really didn't want to admit that he had Alzheimer's. So I wanted him to be able to continue to feel good about himself. So I actually set up a checking savings account for him that was joint with me. Because again, I had power of attorney, so I could move things around a bit. I made sure that he always had $200 in that account. Everything else was protected, and he really didn't have access to it anymore. But he didn't know that because he still had that $200. A couple of years into his diagnosis, he actually had somebody stop at his home. He was outside working in his yard. They came by, a couple, old car, and pulled up to the driveway. They had a child with them and said their child was ill. And they said they needed money for health care for this child. My father was always very generous as he became older and as he became more impaired with Alzheimer's. He became more generous. And so his inclination was to help this couple. They took him to the credit union. They asked him to withdraw all of his funds, so he did. He had access to that $200 that he knew about, and he gave it to them. They left him there in the parking lot, and he walked home. So it was really awful that that happened to him, but his money was protected because of the safeguards that we had put up. Everything else was still there, and I was able to replace that $200. So we tried very hard to do everything we could to protect him financially, but also to make sure that we didn't take away his sense of self-esteem.
Okay, so now we are going to talk a little bit about identifying financial and legal needs. So it can feel, stressful to think about the future, especially if you're caring for someone with a chronic illness. And jobs, family responsibilities, other duties often get in the way in finding the time to make these plans. But we've talked about how important it is. So we're going to look at some of the steps, and many of which you can complete without a financial advisor or attorney. So the first step in organizing finances and making a plan to cover care costs is to look at income and spending. So there is a handout on covering care costs, which we won't go into today just because of lack of time. But if we, look at income and spending, we can look at, what's coming in, what's coming out, seeing if there's places to cut back on spending and building up savings for unexpected care costs. And we'll hear this video.
One thing that I would suggest is when you have those monthly bills is to call. I had cable and I said, hey, I can't pay this amount when I'm looking at all of the bills that we had. And they didn't want to lose me as a customer, so they reduced the cost of the cable. Also, the medical bills, even though you get a demand for payment for a certain amount of money, call them, go on the payment plan, talk to the hospital about a payment plan, talk to the different utilities. I was on a budget for heat. I was on a budget for electricity. Reach out and ask. And don't do all those calls at one day. Break it up and do one at a time so you don't get overwhelmed with it.
Keeping within a budget, the budget is really, really important for food, because it's very tempting to go into a grocery store and find all kinds of delicacies. So that's been a big change and a good one. We found that for the two of us, we were spending a lot of money on groceries. So taking a look at that is really helped.
And then next is to take inventory of assets and debts. So assets are anything that's owned that has value, like house or bank account, or stocks. Debt is money that is borrowed and paid back over time, like credit cards and loans. And another important step in making a financial action plan is to identify the costs of care, so current costs and in the future. And so, medical insurance can pay for some costs, but it may not cover all of them. So you may be looking at costs for ongoing medical treatment, prescription drugs, personal care supplies, adult day services, in-home care, um, and full-time residential care services. And since Alzheimer's is a progressive disease, caregivers will also eventually need to assume many ongoing financial responsibilities like paying bills, arranging for benefit claims, making investment decisions, and preparing tax returns. It might be helpful to look into financial resources that can cover the costs of care. So some of these common funding sources include personal resources like income, 401, or other retirement accounts, savings, stocks, bonds, personal property, as well as federally funded resources like Medicare, Parts A, B, and D, veterans benefits, SSDI, and the Compassionate Allowance Initiative, or state funded resources like Medigap, Medicaid, and you can also find additional resources at benefitscheckup.org. There is a handout that you might find helpful as well with many of the funding resources and phone numbers and websites. You can also call the Alzheimer's Association's free 24/7 helpline, who can also be really helpful in answering some of these questions about these resources, as well as connecting you with other low cost or free community support services. So, legal planning makes sure that you or a trusted family member or friend can make decisions for the person living with the disease when they can no longer make those decisions themselves. So, it's important to make legal plans just as important as financial plans as early as you can so that everyone is well prepared. Putting legal plans in place doesn't have to be stressful or difficult. And getting legal advice and services from an attorney who specializes in elder law can be helpful. However, there are a number of legal documents that you can complete on your own.
Most of these resources you can access online. You can access from multiple different entities. And I did most of all of her documents that were necessary: the power of attorney, the living will, the healthcare power of attorney, the financial power of attorney. All of those things you can access, and you can get them notarized and legal documents created. So don't let that be a hindrance to take care of those items, because those items are really, really important early on in the disease. If you wait, it's only going to cause more problems. So the earlier you get it, the better. And don't be afraid of the nuances of all these documents and all these papers. It's pretty simplified if you research it. There's a really simple way to go about it and take care of it as soon as possible.
And then you also want to take inventory of any legal documents that are already in place, review them, and see if they need any updates if necessary. And you want to make sure that at the very least that you have a durable power of attorney both for healthcare and finances. So that allows someone to name someone to make healthcare or financial decisions when they're no longer able to do so themselves, as well as a living will, which is different than a will where you're leaving someone your possessions, but this document explains a person's wishes for medical treatment at the end of life. And this slide covers, help finding a legal professional. And you'll have copies of these slides as well, so you can have these resources. And then lastly is just creating a backup plan in case something happens to you as the caregiver and you're no longer able to provide care. So talk with family and friends about who could take over different caregiving responsibilities if you become unable to do so. This includes managing your money and the money of the person living with the disease. Consider assigning responsibilities to more than one person if there are no other family members who are willing to take this on. Work on creating a plan with the person that you're caring for and possibly an attorney. If you are the agent for the person's power of attorney, which means that you are the one who will make um, legal, financial, or medical decisions on their behalf, it's a good idea to have a trusted backup agent in case something happens to you. So talk with the person you're caring for about who would be that person to carry out those responsibilities. And then keep an up to date list of medical information for the person, like their current medications, as well as contact information for doctors or anybody else that's involved with the person's care. And one of the best things that you can do as a caregiver is take care of your own health and well being. And so visit your doctor regularly, eat well, stay physically active, look into respite care, other support services through the Alzheimer's Association. Ask for and get help from others, accept help. Sometimes it's hard to do that. Build a care team around you of family and friends, and utilize the Alzheimer's Association. There are a lot of free tools that can help you make this plan. We have a new app, the ALZ Journey app, that's really helpful. And lastly is just, I mentioned the 24/7 helpline. Definitely write that down. Our website's phenomenal. There's lots of information there. And alz.org/CRF is our community resource finder where you can find a lot of services that are in the community. And so I know I am not going to play the last video there, but I just want to wrap up with our Q&A. And we did have some questions that came in through the registration. We also have a new community educator volunteer with us today who also happens to be an attorney, but is not here to give legal advice, but may be able to answer a couple of those questions that came in more general terms. So, Amy, I'm going to turn over to you to answer a couple of those sort of more general questions, and then we can open it up to folks that are here if they have other questions.
Okay, I'm just going to unmute myself. So thank you, Jennifer. That was great information. And so I'm Amy Griboff. I'm an estate planner and elder law attorney, and am new to being a volunteer at the Alzheimer's Association. But as Jennifer mentioned, we did have a lot of questions. I am wondering, because I don't know if the folks who submitted the questions are here, whether I should start trying to answer the questions now, or yes, I'm getting Wendy shaking her head. Okay, so I guess I'll just start at the top and kind of go down through what I have as questions. So one is that somebody had a new Alzheimer's diagnosis and where to start on financial and legal issues. And hopefully this presentation's been very helpful. I think often I try to think of trying to get a community or a village of folks who are part of your team, so that might be a financial planner, to help with this planning, as well as an elder law attorney as part of the team as well. And so that's where I would start building my team. Another question was, could I talk about Medicaid compliant annuities? Medicaid compliant annuities are a Medicaid strategy that we use when there's a couple and one person is going into a nursing home and the community spouse is living in the home, and we can protect assets for a couple, one needing Medicaid and the community spouse, we can turn assets and put them into a Medicaid compliant annuity, and it protects those assets. There's a lot of information that goes into it, but it is a strategy I've used in the past. What is a special needs trust? How do I adjust my own estate plan so that my disabled son doesn't forfeit, I'm assuming, benefits or something like that? And so I do a little special needs planning, but again, this is kind of a unique area of the law, and I would probably advise somebody to see somebody who does special needs planning. There are attorneys that do this every day, and I can refer people to some of my colleagues. Let's see, how do we manage money and begin conversations about revocable trusts where one person is not competent but not legally recognized as such, and the other does not seem to recognize the severity of their own illness. So it's a complicated question, but I do advise on revocable trusts. If somebody, even though they haven't been recognized as perhaps incompetent, I have met with folks who will bring in a loved one and say, oh, well, we want to do an estate plan. And I meet with them and I'm like, they're not following when I have to explain what is a revocable trust. It's a very complicated estate planning strategy. And so I think the attorney that would be meeting with somebody talking about these issues would probably have to decide whether the person could even could the estate planner create a revocable trust, because even though the person hasn't been recognized as incompetent, they just may not be able to follow this complicated estate strategy. Let's see, where do we identify funds to support a family member living or really thriving in a combination senior residential assisted living environment? Where do we identify funds to support a family member living? Where do we identify funds? I'm not sure I understand that question. There was another question about respite care, specifically federal, also in Montgomery County. You know what, I'm going to just throw my contact information into the chat. I worked and had my own business up in Montgomery County for many years. So oftentimes there's an organization called Maryland Access Point. Also, their acronym is MAP, M-A-P, and I would contact them. They are a great place to start. Other than Alzheimer's Association is awesome, but from Maryland, another resource is Maryland Access Point, and each county has an access point, and they're a great place to start trying to figure out respite care, caregiving resources, funding for the person's care. So that's where I would start. In addition, another question was, which is less expensive, basically home care or sending somebody to a nursing home facility? And I'm not sure either of them. Nursing home facilities right now are costing my clients $15,000 to $16,000 per month. If you need or if your loved one needs home care 24 hours a day, you're going to be spending that much money at home. So I'm not sure either is less expensive. It depends on the person's needs, finances, what's best for them. So anyway, that's some of the questions that we had, and we're right at 2 o'clock. So
And
I don't know.
I want to thank you both, Amy and Jennifer, for the presentation today. And in response to the respite question, I encourage folks to join us for Caregiver webinar series number 2, which is going to be on November the 14th at 1 o'clock. We are going to be talking about plan for care changes, what types of resources and support services that are available, including respite care and long-term care and end-of-life options. So I encourage you to join us for that. At the conclusion of this webinar today, you will be receiving the resources and support materials that Jennifer referenced. I'm going to put our website hub address in the chat right now. I encourage you to give care for yourselves as well. We do offer a variety of evidence-based workshops if you have not attended, building better caregivers as well as powerful tools for caregivers. That is also part of this MDOA ACL grant. So we have classes running pretty much monthly. They're 6-week workshops to engage folks in caregiving for themselves. So thank you all again, and we will look forward to seeing you again on November the 14th. You all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.